Hi everybody, welcome back to the channel. This is part 2 of our Turning on a Dime series. It's all about getting started with wood turning on a budget. We're only going to be using an entry-level lathe like this. This is the Record Power DML 250, which I introduced to you in episode 1. It has 5 speeds which are changed manually, and on this we can turn pieces up to 10 inches in diameter. Now the main turning tools we're going to be using are the Record Power carbide tools. Now these are a little bit more expensive, but other sets of carbide tools are available for around £50–60 a set, and when you're beginning they'll do you just fine. I'll be putting links to everything I use in the description below. Now starting off last week we worked on a couple of spindle turnings. We made a honey dipper and a very rustic wand. We're going to carry on with spindle turning for the next episode or two until we've honed a few of our skills and we've made enough items in order to sell to get ourselves a chuck for this machine. Now the first thing we're going to make this week is a mallet, and for this I've got a piece of cherry which I cut down a couple of years ago, and it's just been left outside. It has a couple of splits in one end, but we're going to use that end as the handle, so I think we'll be all right. Now throughout this series I am not going to be using any bought timber. Everything I turn is either going to be free or from a log pile or pieces that I've found. So let's get started. Now when we're mounting pieces on the lathe, it's very important that we try and find the centers first. So looking at this end, I would say the center is pretty much where the pith area is there, right in the middle of the wood. We'll do that for both ends. Now this end, as you can see, it does have some splitting from where the wood's dried. So as that's the narrow end anyway, I'm going to be using that for the handle end of the mallet. Now we can mount this in the lathe either way, so either that way or that way, it doesn't really matter. But initially, to make sure we can get a good grip with our drive spur, I'm going to hammer this in using a rubber mallet. I don't have a wooden mallet yet because we haven't made one. Now very important is that when you do hammer it in, don't hammer it in on the bed of the lathe. Put it on the floor or on some concrete or outside or something like that, so you're not going to put any stress on your equipment. Okay, so now hitting that in has meant that the prongs on the drive spur have gone into the wood, and that's going to give us a nice firm grip when it starts to turn. We're going to bring up the tailstock. So our live center goes into the hole, lock it off and start to apply pressure. When we've got enough, we can lock it off, and now we are nicely safe on the lathe. As you can see, we're a little bit out of balance, but this isn't a perfectly straight piece of wood, but I'm sure we're going to be fine. If you were slightly unsure, then it's very easy just to loosen this off and then just move it a little bit to where you feel it will be better balanced. Give it a test. That's actually better. We'll leave it there. Now because this piece is slightly out of balance, we're going to be starting at the slowest speed on this lathe, which is 450 RPM. And you can change the gear ratios on this by removing these covers at the back and altering the drive belt. So as you can see, we have high bits and low bits. So the first job is to turn it round so everything is nice and even. When it's in that position, then we'll be able to pick up the speed and turning becomes slightly easier. Now to start getting this round, we're going to be using the square tip tool, which is the roughing tool. And we're just going to have it nice and flat on our tool rest. Put your hand over the top and then just gently present the cutting edge to the surface of the wood, and just allow this sharp profile to remove the wood. We're not shoving it in hard or anything like that. We're just gently pushing it in until we get this nice and round. Okay, as you can see, we're starting to make progress. It's a little slow when you start off because we're only going at 450 RPM. As soon as we get this round, we can really pick up the speed and turning will become an awful lot easier. But it's very, very important at this stage to try and keep calm, keep relaxed, don't try and rush it, and just take your time. Now, because this is off balance, you will see the lathe moving a little bit. Now, you can bolt it down to a good secure surface, but as everyone won't be able to do that, I'm going to keep on going like this. Okay, we're doing well. We haven't quite turned it fully round yet. As you can see, we've still got some bark on here as well. But I've just done a quick first pass to remove the majority of the high points. We can now move up to the next gear on our lathe, which is 980 RPM. Okay, getting that speed up is really helping us turn a lot easier now. We've still got some bark to remove here, but we're going to clear off the rest of this first and then decide on our next steps. There's not so much bark left that we can't start making plans for how this is going to look. Okay, now we've got it nearly round, we can start imagining where this mallet is inside this piece of wood. Now, ideally, we want a nice hitting surface with a bit of mass to it, which is going to come from this thicker area at the top. Remember, we had a couple of splits on the bottom here, which you can see there, so we're leaving that to be the handle. Now, ideally, when you're making mallets, you don't use pieces of wood like this, but this is what we have to hand, so it's going to do us perfectly well. Normally you would try and avoid wood that has a pith in it because that can dry out, it can crack, but we're doing this for practice, we're doing this for free essentially, so we'll make do with what we've got. So initially we want to make our hitting area at the top here, so let's just pretend for now that that's going to be the top. Now, there's no necessarily right way or wrong way to make a mallet. It's a tool which does a job, and if it works for you, then that's going to be absolutely fine. So that's a nice big hitting area we've got at the top. Now, handle wise, again, this is going to be down to the size of your hand, but I would imagine somewhere around there for the grip, and then we want a piece of wood slightly wider at the bottom to stop the mallet flying out of our hand if we're hitting a little bit too enthusiastically. Right, so now we've got these markings in place, I'm just going to take down the wood at the top of the mallet. I'm going to take it down here and down here as well, and there at the end, just so we can start seeing the shape emerge and start planning the next step. Okay, now we've defined our areas. Now looking at this and putting my hand on it, the mallet for me may be a little bit too long in that handle area. So because we haven't removed too much wood yet, I can still put the bulbous end just a little bit further up, which I'll do in a minute. Now, one thing to bear in mind, this isn't the most powerful lathe in the world. If I was doing this on my lathe, which is underneath, I could just take the roughing tool and just go straight in to the desired width we want. But because this is about 1/5 of the power of the larger machine, we have to do it more gradually than that. Another thing we can do is to take the detail tool, which is this one, and start taking it down with this. This one, because the tip is smaller, the wood will resist it less, so we can go slightly deeper, slightly more quickly than the fatter tool. But obviously it won't remove quite as much wood because it is a smaller surface area. So I'm going to continue taking down this handle. I'll move this area slightly further up and we'll start taking this down to somewhere near where we want it to be. Ideally, we want a kind of a handle shape which is nice for a grip, so it'll be something that kind of curved shape. But obviously handle shapes are very, very personal, so develop it to something which suits you. So there we are. With the detail tool, we've managed to take a lot of wood out from these ends and start creating the handles. So I can now go back in with a roughing tool and start taking down this area. Okay, progress is going very good. Right, that handle is still a little bit wide for my hands, so we'll refine that in a second. But before I do that, I just want to do a little bit more work on the actual mallet itself. Now we've still got some bark on here, so we need to remove that and bear in mind of the correct shape for a mallet. Now the ideal shape for a mallet head is slightly narrower on the base than it is at the top. It'll allow for a nice square hit when we come to carving or whatever we're going to do with it. So I'm just going to angle my tool rest rather than it being square with the bed of the lathe. I'm just going to angle it in a little bit to represent the angle I want on this piece. And all I'm going to do is just keep my back of my hand firmly against the tool rest. And as I'm holding the tool, I'm just going to run it up and down. So this angle here will be represented on the piece itself. Okay, now we've nearly removed it all, so I'm going to do the last few passes when we remove the rest of this bark with the finishing tool. This is the round tip, and instead of going square on like we had the roughing tool, we're going to turn it to about 45-degree angles and then just pull it gently across the surface, nice and slow action. And this is going to act as like a shear scraper. And if you just take a look at that surface now, and I'll show you what it's like again after a few passes with the finishing tool. There we go, just a few simple passes. As you can see, that surface finish is an awful lot better than we had before. Now we've still got a little bit more of the bark to take off, so I'll go ahead and do that. And this part is just about done. Okay, well, I think that's as good as we can get that. So let's move back onto the handle. Now, I haven't got the biggest hands in the world, so I need to come in probably about 1/2 inch on this top, 1/4 inch in the middle, and then back to 1/2 inch on the ends as well. And that gives a nice shape grip in order to hold this comfortably. I will keep stopping it regularly and testing it out to see how it feels in the hand. In terms of which tool you use, it's entirely up to you. I'm going to start off with the detail tool because it's going to allow me to get into this corner nice and easily. Okay, so the detail tool has taken in these areas here. So now I'm going to use the finishing tool, the round one, and just put a gentle curve on here and keep on tweaking it until I feel it's okay for the hand. If these need to go in still further, then I'll do that. But otherwise it's going to be a gradual process of shape test until finished. Right, I think that's getting pretty close. Just a little bit off this area, and I think that'll do. Okay, that's pretty good. I just need to do a little bit of refining on this corner, a little bit there, and I need to bring this down just a tad because at the moment that's just a little bit wide. Okay, I'm very, very happy with that. All we need to do now really is to sand. But before we can sand, we need to clear some more space around the top with our detail tool and the same on the handle. The last little bits we're going to cut off with a saw, so we don't need to worry too much about going all the way through. Right, before you do any sanding whatsoever, you do need a good quality face mask. If you're going to spend any money on any good piece of equipment, make a good face mask your first purchase. Again, there's links in the description to something like this. These are only about 20 to 30 pounds, but they are rated very, very highly, and it will cut out 99.5% of the dust that this is going to be producing. Now to sand this, I've just got a piece of 120 grit sandpaper, I'm just going to be holding it in my hand flat underneath as I'm moving up and down. Now there is going to be dust in the atmosphere from this, so with my normal shop vacuum I'm just going to be holding this close as I'm going along, and that will keep the majority of the dust out of the air. Okay, and that's 120 grit, which for a mallet is absolutely fine. If you want to refine it further, then you can carry on going up the grits, but it's a tool, it's designed for hitting things, so 120 grit is absolutely smooth and good enough for the job. Now we can make it a little bit better surface by getting some of our shavings and holding those against the wood as it's spinning, and this is called burnishing. This just puts some of the oil back from the shavings into the wood. Okay, right, we're going to put the same finish on that we did last week with the honey dipper and the wand. This is a beeswax and mineral oil finish. Strictly speaking, the mallet doesn't need an awful lot of a finish on it. You could probably make do with no finish at all. But because we're wanting to make a nice looking piece that we're hopefully going to sell, then applying a finish is certainly going to add to its appeal. Okay, now using the same cloth I used to apply the polish, I'm just going to again turn the lathe on and holding this cloth against it, going up and down the piece. At the end I'll get a fresh piece of cloth and go over the surface to remove any excess. Excellent. Perfect. Right, I'm going to quickly saw off these ends and then we'll work on something else. Okay, ends are all sanded, so I can just go back on and apply a bit more finish. Now for this piece we used a piece of cherry which I had cut down a few years ago. The main reason I used that piece is because it was wide enough to be able to get about a 4-inch hitting head at one end. Now ideally you wouldn't use a piece of wood with a pith in, because there's a chance that that could crack over time. So if you have anything laying around without pith in, then use that, or you could even glue up boards together to make one as well, which I'll be showing you how to do in forthcoming episodes. Right, let's make something else. Okay, for this next project I've got this piece of beech. I think it was a part of an old table leg or something like that, but it's going to be ideal for our next item. Now again, we're going to mark the centres and get it on the lathe between centres. Okay, nice and safely between centres. Step one is to get this round, and then I'll tell you what we're making. Okay, that's got that nice and round, except for that little flat bit there, but that doesn't matter because it is going to be coming in a little bit anyway. So what we're going to make this time is a nice little useful tool for the garden. When you're planting your bulbs in the garden, you make a hole to a certain depth with a tool called a dibber, and that is exactly what we're going to make. Now this is one of the simpler items to make, but they are very, very useful and make wonderful presents. So the first thing we want to do is figure out how long we want to dib. So we need some area in from the end because of the spike going into the wood, and the average dibber is marked up to about 6 inches. So that's the area which is going to penetrate the soil, and we're going to be putting markings on here at increments of 1 inch. So the rest of it is what we have left for our handle. So I'm just going to put little marks on here, denoting our start and cut-off points. There we go. And to start off with the detail tool, I'm just going to cut in here to the final width we want this piece to be. Now, dibbers, you need to be able to get a bulb into the hole you're creating, so you don't want to go too thin. So I'm probably going to go in a bit here, about 1/2 inch, and then we're going to taper this from the top down to that point. Okay, that's pretty good. Right, now we can set our angle as we've just used with the mallet. Again, rather than being square to the lathe bed, we're just turning it in slightly, and then we can follow this tool rest with our roughing tool, and slowly that will create a nice taper down to the tip. Okay, so there's our angle nicely put into the end of the dibber. I'm just going to go over that again with the finishing tool just to give it a slightly better finish. Wonderful, nice and simple. Now we need a nice decorative handle here, and we want to try and put in a series of 4 grips for the hand, for these 4 fingers. So I'm just going to mark out, if we say, right, that's the top of our dibbing bit there. So we want a bit of an area at the top for some sort of decoration, and the same on this end. And then if we mark in the middle, and then in the middle of those 2 again, will give us a nice space to put in 4 little areas of detail. And for this, I'm just going to use the detail tool, and rather than going at an angle, I'm just going to go straight in, and I'm just going to rock between the 2 until we put in coves into each of these 4 areas. That's our finger holds for it. So make sure it's nice and comfortable. So with the detail tool, I'm just going to have a play around in these two areas, creating a nice little shape. Not quite sure exactly what yet, but we'll figure out something as we're doing it. And then we can move on from that and then put measurements in for our depth. Okay, looks nice like that. Right, let's get our ruler out. Now I'm not going to worry too much about imperial and metric on this occasion. We're just going to mark in inches. So now I'm just going to come in with the detail tool on each of these points, apart from that bottom one, just to make a mark so they're easy to see, and then we're going to make them stand out a little bit more. Okay, now to make these marks stand out a little bit more, I've got some very hard wood here, and I'm just going to hold it underneath and touch it into that groove and start applying pressure upwards. And this is going to cause heat through friction, and it's going to char this line. Now you don't have to use ebony, which this is. You can use basically anything which is harder than this material that you're trying to burn. Most people use wire for this, but I don't have any handy, so I'm going to try it with ebony. All right, excellent. Right, I'm going to quickly open a window because this may set off the smoke detectors. Okay, last steps before sanding. I just want to start off the slightest of points on this end and then start parting off a little bit more on this end. Okay, mask on for sanding. Again, that was 120 grit. That's all this needs. So we can go back on with our mineral oil and beeswax finish. In the next episode, I shall show you how to make this yourself, because finishes can be expensive. And like anything else, if you can learn how to make it yourself, then you can save yourself a few pounds or dollars or whatever the currency is in your region. Right, let's buff this in. Okay, that's really come out nicely. So I'll cut off these ends and then quickly sand them and take a look at what we've done. So there we go. I've got a nice cherry mallet made from an unwanted tree which was destined for landfill, and a nice beech dibber made from a chair leg. please don't start chopping up your furniture to make these, unless you were going to throw it away anyway. But again, these are 2 items which are desirable, both as gifts for friends, loved ones, or to be sold as well. And don't forget, the whole purpose of this channel is to make you realize that you can make things like this that people do want to buy, and the money you can sell these for, then you can invest back into your hobby. As I mentioned at the start, in a few weeks' time, once we've got a few more spindle turnings under our belt, we're going to invest in a chuck for this little guy, and then we can start working on some more intricate items. Apart from that, thank you very much indeed for watching, and I'll see you next time. Thank you.